Hey, Mark. Listen, I got a great idea for today. How about you letting me have a little advance?
Let's try to move a couple of cars today, huh, Jerry?
I gotta have $30 in a hurry. I promised my kid a new bike today.
You forget you're into me for 200 now. Go on for coffee. Bring you some?
No, thanks. Fred?
Yeah, Jerry.
How about letting me have a couple of thou until Sunday?
If you love listening to this show, please consider giving a rating and a review on Amazon Alexa or wherever you listen. We want to continue bringing you this amazing content, and part of our ability to do that means that we need a big audience. Now, it may not seem like much, but rating and reviewing the show will help more people find us, just like how you found this show. Simply on any podcast platform, search for a show, scroll down to the bottom, and push 5 stars. It's that easy. Thanks for supporting the show. Today, I'm joined by Dune Ives, who is the managing director of Lonely Whale, which is a nonprofit working to eliminate single-use plastic and promote ocean conservation. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be here.
So let me ask you, what drew you to the work that you're doing in the ocean health and conservation?
You know, it really started with a conversation that my former boss, the late Mr. Paul Allen, co-founder of Microsoft, asked all of us on his executive team. And that question was, how do we get people to care for the ocean? What he knew as a philanthropist and as an entrepreneur is that he could put all sorts of money and time and resources into changing policies and corporate practices. But at the end of it, if we don't care for the ocean, it really isn't going to make a difference, because what it will take is individual action, not just one day and one time, but sustained, persistent action to affect change in the water. So when I left working for Paul at Vulcan and Vulcan Philanthropy, I met Adrienne Grenier and Lucy Sumner, the co-founders of Lonely Whale, and realized that we shared this passion for connecting people to not only to the ocean, but really to each other. And that's a whole new way of looking at philanthropy and a way of looking at solving for the ocean health issues that we have in front of us today.
So tell us about what Lonely Whale is and what's the mission of the organization.
So we were founded 5 years ago this December, so in just a couple of weeks. And it was really founded with the intent of doing 2 things. One is bonding people with the ocean, which is easier to say and harder to do. The ocean is vast. It covers nearly 3/4 of the planet. And most of us have no connection to it. If we do see it, if we're lucky enough to see it or to be near it, we really take it for granted. And so how can you bond with something and start to heal it that you're really unaware that it actually has issues that it's dealing with that are the direct cause of our actions and our decisions? But we also had a second mission, and that was one that we called radical collaboration. And the idea there is that everything we do needs to have at least one partner, corporate partner, NGO partner, a scientific partner, an influencer, someone who has gone down that same path that we were about ready to go down before, and they've learned lessons. They have capabilities to bring to the effort so that we really weren't doing it on our own. And I think that really forms the foundation of Lonely Whale. It's solving for ocean health issues, but really doing that together and not working in silos, as many of us do on a daily basis.
Yeah, I'm going to come back to this notion of collectivism and togetherness. One of the guests that we've had on recently talked about this notion of climate crisis and how it, the kind of rhetoric that's out there tends to create more anxiety than really hope and optimism. And my understanding is that your organization really tries to focus on the cheerleading and engaging people in a fun, non-shaming way to really facilitate these conversations around such as, avoidance of single-use plastic, for instance. Can you talk about that approach and why that's distinctively important?
We face really large issues on a daily basis, whether it's the global pandemic that we're currently in, or the climate crisis, or it might just be not having enough money to put food on the table. and send your kids to school. Whatever the crisis is, they're always really big, and it's sometimes really difficult to find the way in. What is the one thing that you can do as a person to affect change on this planet? So when you look at, the largest ice shelf in Canada recently having broken off and now floating in the water, or one of the largest icebergs coming off of Antarctica now floating towards St. George Island, again, as an individual, it's hard to know what to do and where to really start, and to know if what you're doing is actually making a difference. So we decided to break it down in a couple of ways. One is to focus on an ocean threat, plastic pollution, that is very tangible for the average everyday person, including myself. I put myself in the average everyday person category a lot. And with plastic pollution, every year we're seeing roughly 11 million metric tons of new plastic entering the ocean. Well, as an individual person, how do you know where to start? And so we really wanted to start by raising awareness, but not doing it in a way that people felt like, oh gosh, like here we go. I've got to give up everything in order to affect change on the water. Instead, we decided to focus on the one item that everybody can give up every single day, and that is the single-use plastic straw. And I should say here, not everyone can. Some people need plastic straws to drink, and that is a very real issue, and it's something that we work on constantly to address. But for those that don't need a straw, how can you get rid of a straw and at least be part of the conversation? And so we did so in a lighthearted way. We asked people to just stop sucking, because ultimately that's what we're really trying to do, is to stop sucking and to start doing the right thing. And it turns out that lighthearted approach really worked. We had people all over the world in more than 40 countries in just a few months get engaged in the campaign. They made it their own. They love calling each other out. Who hasn't wanted to tell somebody to stop sucking every now and then? And it really opened up the conversation in a way that was very safe for people to really engage in. And what we found with this is that people didn't stop with the straw. Once you start noticing single-use plastic, you can't help but notice that it's everywhere. And so immediately our campaign resulted in people asking about, well, what about in a restaurateur's case, what about the oysters and shellfish that come encased in plastic that can't be recycled? What do we do with that kind of plastic? And that really was the intent of the campaign: get people engaged in a funny, lighthearted way, and then open up their eyes and have them really spark their own curiosity about the crisis and how to get involved. And I think that works really well, rather than shaming or it feeling heavy or the penguins are going to die. I mean, all that is true, but in this case, we really need to start in a place where people can engage with the topic.
We had a guest named Rebecca Costa that spoke to us and explained to us, I can't remember if it was actually on the interview itself or post, but this notion of how we really, understand and absorb new information. And when it's constructed in a story format, we tend to do a very better job of relating to it and understanding it, and then ultimately, persisting that information long term. Why is storytelling so important to really change hearts and minds and ultimately the culture in terms of consumption behavior?
So I'm a psychologist by training, and spent the better part of my career before joining Pollitt at Vulcan in what's called change management within organizations. And what you learn when you get involved in change processes at the individual or the organizational level is that you need to be able to envision the future. And oftentimes we envision the future by having an analogy from the past or having something that we can relate to. Stories allow the hearts and the minds to open. It allows us to retain information by taking that new learned information and attaching it to our memories, things that existed in the past that are familiar to us. And when we connect those stories to things that are familiar to us, we can retain it, and we can also play it back when the time is right. So storytelling is very much the same way. When we lead with a story about a character, it opens up the heart and it allows you to create empathy with that character. We love to save things as humans. We save people, but we also love to save animals. And so storytelling through the lens of an animal and storytelling through a community or through a child allows you to really understand the situation from their perspective, build empathy with that, retain that in your memory, and then be able to apply that in a future situation. Plastic pollution is no different than that. And being able to craft, to tell that story and shape it in a way that people can really relate to it and it doesn't feel so hard or so big, or quite honestly, that they're alone in this fight, in this quest that they have for a healthy planet, allows people to really engage in what you're putting forward. So I think that's true with plastic pollution. It certainly is true with the climate crisis as well. And we're seeing it today with the pandemic and the stories about the people who are being affected, those who are being left behind by those who have been lost to the pandemic. And that really grips you in it. And I think it really helps you create affinity for the topic and really want to fight for it as well.
We started the conversation with this notion of engaging, partnering, doing it together, conversation. And one of the beautiful thing about stories is that the construct forces us to have to share and interact. And I think visually, I think of almost like a campfire where stories are being told. And it kind of has that built-in virality around it. And many times we're telling a lot of stories, certainly when it comes to climate change. But I wonder, are there stories that we're not telling? Or perhaps not being told?
Yeah, I think we're not telling enough stories of solutions. I think we do a good job as a species of raising alarm. We're telling the story of the community that's being affected or the community that's about to be affected. And we tend to focus on those negative stories. That's what gets the media attention. And it certainly is what gets shared across social media. But what we found in our work is that when we tell a story of solutions and we allow somebody to really engage with an individual who has been fighting on the front lines in a way that has resulted in success, that success begets success. And people want to understand that perspective and they want to hear it. They really want to know what the solution was and the path to get there. So more solution stories is something that we're really committed to. And we find that our audience really resonates with that. They don't necessarily like the bad news. They like those success stories and they like understanding the perspectives of the people who are behind the success. So a good example of that is this amazing young ocean hero from Hawaii, from Oahu, Dyson Chi, who we met when he was just in his early teens. And 3 years after we met him, after he went through our first Ocean Heroes Bootcamp, he helped pass some of the most sweeping legislation on plastic pollution that we've seen to date, not just in the US, but elsewhere. And that's the power of one youth's voice to be able to carry the weight of an entire council and to give the rest of us hope. So we've been very committed to telling his story as well as other young leaders and corporate leaders as well, so that others might follow suit. And we find that people get really inspired by those solution stories, but we don't have enough of them. We need more solution stories. The solutions are out there. We just need to capture them and tell more solution stories to get more people inspired and excited to be part of it.
So you mentioned the boot camp, but I know that there's other campaigns that you're doing as well. And just before the start of this interview, you mentioned there's a new one that's about to launch or have launched. Can you talk about that?
I can. I'm very excited to announce that yesterday we launched the Plastic Innovation Prize with Tom Ford of Tom Ford International. It's a really important campaign for us. At Lonely Well, we always look for those items that aren't getting enough attention. So you asked me about stories not being told. Every year annually, the fashion industry uses an estimated 100 billion poly bags. These are plastic bags that clothing and shoes and other items are shipped in. And very few of these are recycled. Also in the United States, on an annual basis, using a very similar material, families use an estimated 125 billion sandwich and storage baggies, again, every single year, and they're not recycled. So with Tom Ford's leadership, we're launching this Plastic Innovation Prize to find solutions for these plastic items and to bring those solutions to market. So we're very excited. There will be a campaign, a creative campaign that will accompany this Plastic Innovation Prize, and it officially launched yesterday.
That's terrific. And I think we've had many people from the fashion industry and as well as, those that are celebrities as well. And this is a big topic, really, that truly affects everyone. And it's not just the bags that they come in, but the actual materials themselves, as well as the waste within the luxury industry. So I'm glad to hear that. That's very exciting. When you talk about solutions, what are we talking about in terms of not just human behavior and consumption behavior, but are you also getting into technology and new approaches when it comes to solutions?
We are. And I will say one thing about solutions on the plastic pollution crisis front. that there's a report that just came out by Pew Charitable Trust and Systemic, and it identified some pretty non-sexy solutions to solve for the plastic pollution crisis: collection and recycling. We don't have enough of either one of those, and one of the problems is that we don't have enough end-of-life solutions for the materials that are being collected. So I think oftentimes when we think about solutions, we think, oh gosh, something brand new needs to be created. And oftentimes that's not the case. What we need is really right in front of us. We just need to do more of it. We also need to use less to begin with. So if we use less and the oil and gas industry produces fewer virgin plastic resins, then we won't be in the crisis that we're currently in. But on the solution front, what we're finding with companies that we work with is that there are some really exciting applications of materials that are found presently in the ocean or before they get into the ocean. And companies are using that material and they're turning it into new products. Trek Bicycles is a great example of that. They have taken fishing nets that were once bound for the ocean off the coast of Chile, and they have turned that material into water bottle cages for mountain bikes. It's called the Bontrager Back Cage. And it's really exciting to see them take material that used to be virgin and now replacing it with these fishing net materials. We're seeing the same from all of our NextWave member companies. And it's really exciting to see what they're doing with existing processes, existing tools, but now they're just replacing like for like material and really demonstrating that material that's considered a waste product right now actually has great utility and a role in our economy.
Well, I think, again, I don't think we're going to have time to go into it, but there are certainly, the usage on the consumption and manufacturing side that needs to be addressed. And then the other aspect of it that I don't think we cover adequately is the substitutes. There are new bio-based and carbon-based materials that can, in fact, deteriorate over time, much better than obviously petroleum-based. So those have to come into play from a cost structure. And then really, I think the last part to your point is the infrastructure. I think, I think it's a known fact at this point that because we're used to shipping so much garbage and recycling to China, and China has really effectively refused it or, redirected it to Southeast Asia, we don't have domestic capabilities to handle recycling properly. So there's a lot of infrastructure issues, misalignment, and some of this is much more, I would say, institutionalized because of the lobbying aspects of some of these industries. So we need to really be free of it. And I think stories play a critical component. And, we've been running this show for the last couple of years, and it's been interesting to hear that those that are very much in this space have seen a remarkable shift. And a lot of that shift, I think, is due to this storytelling efforts that's really starting to seep into the minds of the consumers. My question for you, next question, is really around the role of corporations. You mentioned the current campaign, but those that are making the boxes, those that are creating the packages, those fast-moving consumer product category types of companies, as well as industrials, what is their responsibility in this whole ecosystem?
So we all have a responsibility to solve for the plastic pollution crisis. Me as an individual, where recycling is available, I need to get it into the recycling bin. And I also need to make my voice known. The oil and gas and petrochemical industry has a responsibility to act and not just put forward new initiatives as they've been doing the last few years, but really make a commitment to not produce virgin plastic resins anymore, especially those that have an end of life that can't be recycled. And then CPG companies, they have a considerable place in this fight against plastic pollution in our ocean. There are new materials that need to be constructed. There are new business models that need to be developed as well. I think what we have seen in the old business models cannot continue if what we want to do is avoid the best case scenario from the Pew report was 5 million metric tons of new plastic in the ocean at the year 2040. I think that's 5 million metric tons of new plastic in the ocean too many by the year 2040 because that's a cumulative year-over-year number. At worst case, it's 29 million metric tons with business as usual. So right now, everybody has to really sit down and in earnestness and with great intention, rethink the business models and not go back to normal, but really look for ways to really leapfrog where we are. So don't produce any more sachets. Sachets do not have end of life. That is going to do more good than harm to the environment. And make sure that every piece of plastic that is used to package a product can be recovered and it can be fully recycled. Don't leave it to the consumer. Don't leave it to me to solve for the problem. As you mentioned, we already have an issue with our waste management recycling infrastructure. In the States alone, we're seeing closures due to COVID, but also closures due to not having buyers for this material that's collected in these waste collection facilities. So choose materials that can be fully recycled. Look for new opportunities. There's some exciting things happening with plant-based material, pea protein. I would say we should really think hard about avoiding going with compostable plastics and biodegradable unless we have the infrastructure to really capture that and to incorporate it, which we don't in most places of the world. And be bold. Leapfrog the cycles of innovation within a company's walls that take so much time and are really hard to overcome for some companies. But now is the time to be bold. Now is the time to be bold on climate, and it's the time to be bold on plastic and to present solutions that are really viable for a healthy planet.
So how can people learn more about Lonely Whale?
Very easy. You can go to lonelywhale.org. And you'll see our campaigns. You'll see ways to get engaged with us and to stay informed about the work that we have coming up.
So today we've been joined by Dune Ives, who is the managing director of Lonely Whale. Thanks for joining today.
Thank you for having me.
If you've enjoyed this episode, take a moment to rate our show on any podcast platform that you listen to. Scroll down to the bottom and push 5 stars. It's that easy. And as always, thanks for listening.